I think it's too early to talk about alternative development when you're talking about regions of the world that have never had basic development. And so the United States has been demanding that these peasant farmers who live in very remote areas stop growing things like coca and opium poppies and marijuana and grow instead hundreds of kilos of fruits and vegetables to transport in vehicles they don't have over roads that literally don't exist, to sell in markets, both domestic and export, they don't have access to. And even if they did, to compete against an international global economy, that is to say cheap imports from agribusiness, very often subsidized by our tax dollars, against which these farmers don't stand a chance. Right? What farmer in Kansas or California or Virginia would grow tons of corn or soybean if they had no vehicles, no markets, no roads? Who farms to go out of business? And that's what we've been expecting these farmers to do, and they haven't been doing it. They've gone back to planting coca, or they've become displaced, or they've joined the illegal armed actors, the guerrillas in Colombia or the paramilitary death squads in Colombia. And so this has been a dismal failure. One of the reasons for that is that there's simply too much land in this world, ungoverned spaces, where there isn't a whole lot of state presence or police presence to stop you from putting a seed in the ground and coming up with an illicit crop that's going to be able to feed your family in ways much better than growing conventional crops. This is an image from NASA. This is a nighttime satellite compilation of different population centers. So it measures light output. It's skewed towards societies that have access to electricity, but nonetheless it gives you a good sense of where the major population centers are. And for the past 5 years, the United States government has spent more than $4.5 billion trying to eradicate coca from this area in Colombia. As you can see, it's fairly dark there. There's not a whole lot of population centers. Similarly, in Bolivia and Peru and southern Colombia, with these are the coca growing regions, there's very little state presence. And if by some miracle we're able to get rid of coca from the Amazon and the Andean regions, there's always sub-Saharan Africa, there's Asia. Coca is a plant that grows in many different soils and climates. Before World War II, Indonesia was a major exporter of cocaine. There were plantations on Taiwan, in Iwo Jima, Hawaii, you name it. And so we've been trying to stamp out this crop, and all we've been able to do is push it around. The balloon effect. You squeeze on one end of the balloon, pops out the other end. Or Senator Ted Stevens once called it whack-a-mole. We've been trying to beat this mold out one hole and it pops up another, and it keeps going around and around and around. Unfortunately, that has a lot of serious collateral damage and human consequences. So I'll talk a little bit about that. Well, this is a simple prohibition chart. Shows you the price of an ounce of gold. This is probably 2003 prices. Gold has shot up quite a bit. But nonetheless, it gives you a sense of marijuana and gold having the same price. It's kind of silly. This is the other evil bush. Sorry. Actually, coca is not evil at all. I'll talk more about that. Certainly not in the Bolivian context. It's actually quite a good thing. In Colombia, it's more problematic. But we've been trying to attack this plant using crop dusters in Colombia. This is the main instrument of our policies. And we have sprayed more than 1.7 million acres of Colombia. This is the second most biodiverse country in the world. It's led to basically a scorched earth policy. This is a very powerful, broad spectrum herbicide. You can buy a very diluted form of it in your hardware store called Roundup. And even that comes with huge warning labels and a spray bottle applicator that says spray the one weed you're trying to kill. We're dumping this by air over vast stretches of land in Colombia. Even though we sprayed a lot of area in Colombia, Colombia's a very big country. It's the size of Texas and California combined. So is Peru, so is Bolivia. They're each huge land masses. This is what the United States government says we're doing in Colombia, spraying very low altitudes, very precise, precision, GPS-guided spray planes. We're only hitting the coca. And when this plane leaves the field of vision here, it looks like it's spraying some kind of rain, but in fact, it's vaporizing. It's forming a cloud, and that cloud drifts all over the place. It destroys a lot of food crops, a lot of the environment. It goes over water sources and people as well. Farmers and children are sometimes playing out in the fields or harvesting their crops or tending their crops, and there's no warning. It's hard to run out of the center of one of these giant gas clouds without inhaling several times. Here's a plane that's flying, again, very high altitude, much higher than it's supposed to. It's supposed to fly basically at head-top level, but this isn't Kansas. These are very, a lot of palm trees and rough terrain, heading for a house. Here's one flying right over a campesino's house. Again, there's very little coca being grown here. This is slash and burn agriculture. These are very young plants, but they're not supposed to fly directly over the houses anyway. This is the main one of the main portions of our aid package to Colombia, the Black Hawk helicopter. We can talk about lobbying if you want later, but the Connecticut State Congressional Delegation spent a lot of time making sure that Blackhawks were supplied to Colombia rather than Hueys, which are made in Texas. They got a mix in the end of both helicopters. These are out of order, I apologize. This is a counter-narcotics helicopter with a counter-narcotics machine gun donated by the U.S. If you can tell me the difference between a counter-narcotics machine gun and a counterinsurgency machine gun, please let me know. For me, this is a distinction without a difference, and we've been arguing, I've been arguing since before Plan began, that this was more about fighting guerrillas than it was about fighting drugs. This is a view of Putumayo province, which is the southern province of Colombia, which has been the epicenter of U.S. attention. This is where most of the coca had been grown previous to Plan Colombia. And you can see from the aerial view here, this is in the tropics. It's very lush, it's very green, more shades of green than oops, John Stossel, please. This is what happens afterwards. Basically, it kills anything green, it dries up the food crops. You can tell it's been sprayed. The treetops are also defoliated as well. This is a before picture. I have these in the wrong order for some reason. I apologize. And Monsanto, the manufacturer of the chemical, says don't let your livestock graze on these lands once they've been sprayed. These are very poor campesino farmers. They don't have a lot of money to build fancy corrals and that sort of thing. It's hard to control what their animals eat or where they roam. I can't prove this was caused by fumigation, but it happened right after the fumigations. We weren't there to measure the amount of chemical exposed on the livestock and on the humans as well. And so the U.S. Embassy says, well, these people live in a jungle, it's humid, they get rashes, it's because it's the fungus, we didn't do it. But in fact, there's a very striking correlation if you superimpose our spraying patterns with the outbreaks of vomiting, diarrhea, infant death, rashes, that sort of thing. We spray over water sources as well. This is a pond. People raise tilapia or other fish for some protein. These ponds are now destroyed, as are other food crops. This is an agricultural school. This is where we teach people to grow other things besides coca. This is an international aid project. We sprayed that as well. You're getting the sense here. This is a very imprecise thing that we're doing, where it's a very scorched earth policy. These are the food crops: corn, bananas, papayas. These are human health effects. This baby's been sprayed. This woman I met about a week after she got sprayed. Her arms are, you can see the rashes. This man did exactly what we asked him to do. He stopped growing coca and instead grew peppercorns and hearts of palm. We destroyed his farm not once, not twice, not 3 times, 4 times. I've been following this man since 2001. 4 times, 3 times directly we sprayed him, and 1 time through aerial drift from a neighboring farm. He even went so far as to put up these 30-foot poles with white flags that tell spray pilots, please don't spray me, we're not growing coca. We destroyed him nonetheless. Counter-narcotics helicopters. This is an image that's important to keep in mind. You talk about this in Congress, all you hear about is narco-terrorism. Let's go out there and defeat the narco-terrorists, let's hammer them. You never hear about campesinos, you never hear about farmers or their families. These are family farmers. And it's this generation of children that has to agree not to grow coca, not to join the illegal armed actors, the guerrillas or the paramilitaries. And if you're in the middle of a 4-decade-old civil war, this is the generation you have to reach out to and say, hey, the state offers you something else, something better. And instead of bringing these people into the fold of the state, we're driving them away. We're hitting them with a hammer and destroying their food crops and alienating them from the government. This is a very reckless policy in the midst of a 4-decade-old civil war. Finally, I'll just talk a little bit about Bolivia. I came back last night from Bolivia, where things are much more optimistic. There's the president is the first indigenous president in the hemisphere. He's a former coca grower, a union leader. He still is a union leader in the coca grower movement. But the coca there is very different from the coca in Colombia in the way it's used. It's used for traditional purposes. It's a sacred plant. It is a part of every ceremony, indigenous ceremony in the Mayra and Quechua cultures. And it is not to be confused with cocaine. Coca is not cocaine. It can be used to refine into cocaine, but coca in its natural form is something that I'm actually very fond of. I chewed a lot of coca while I was there. You have to, basically, at the altitudes that we're talking about. La Paz is about 2.5 miles above sea level. The air is extremely thin. It's about anywhere from 13,000 to 14,000 feet high. And in fact, the U.S. Embassy's website, I'm not sure if it still does, it did this a year ago, tell people that recommend to take coca tea once you land in La Paz because the altitude sickness, and coca is very good at fighting that. And so, do more in Q&A, but that's a rough summary of what's going on in Latin America. Thank you.